The Nintendo Switch 2 Pro Controller is a blessing to humanity from the gods at Nintendo. Almost everything about this controller is pretty much near perfection, making it a super comfortable and enjoyable way to play your Nintendo Switch 2 games. Right off the bat, the controller feels very familiar if you've used an original Nintendo Switch Pro Controller. You get a very comfortable layout if you've used an Xbox controller with the diagonal control sticks. The face buttons are once again one of the best face buttons on any controller just because of how massive they are. It's so satisfying to mash on these face buttons, especially if you're playing, fighting games or if you're button mashing in Mario Party. The ZL and ZR triggers once again aren't analog, unfortunately, so you won't be able to get precise levels of input in, say, Super Mario Sunshine, but they still do feel really good to press down and they feel really natural where your fingers rest. Playing a shooter game, for example, where you have to kind of spam the trigger button a lot, I think is actually one of the instances where a digital trigger like this one works better. And you also, of course, get a lot of the features that are included in the standard Joy-Con 2 controllers. This controller features motion control, the new HD Rumble 2 that gives you even more levels of vibration, and even near-field communication for your amiibo support. But don't be fooled by the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro Controller at face value because there are quite a few changes from the original Pro Controller. First off, you'll notice that this controller features a nearly seamless design. Unlike the original Nintendo Switch Pro Controller, which had a bunch of ridges and crevices, the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro Controller is pretty much all smooth plastic all around, which Nintendo actually did in order to decrease the amount of dirt and grime that can build up in those little ridges and crevices. I learned about that from the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, only $10 on the Nintendo Switch 2 eShop. And I think this overall design change pretty much just comes down to personal preference. Whether you liked the original Pro Controller, which, I think had a bit more of a grippier feel to it thanks to all of the little bumps on the little handles, compared to the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro Controller, which is really smooth and can honestly sometimes be kind of slippery plastic. But in general, I would say it feels a lot more sort of sophisticated, I guess, or, kind of modern and slick. You may also notice that the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro Controller is what I would consider to be stealth black, I guess, except for the top of the controller, which is this kind of creamy white color. I don't know what the purpose of that is, but I don't know, I think it looks cool. We'll see how crazy Nintendo can go with the different color schemes in the future. Anyway, another huge change with the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro Controller is actually something that you can't even see on camera. The control sticks have pretty much been completely changed this time around. They still have the kind of slightly concave texture similar to the original Pro Controller, but the actual sticks are very quiet and very smooth this time around. It's really hard for me to explain because I feel like it's something that you just have to feel for yourself, but the best way I can describe it is that it feels like they put little bumpers around the edges of the joystick, especially for all you fighting game fans out there. If you're quickly smashing the sticks to the edges, it feels a lot softer and less sort of mechanical feeling than, I guess, the original Pro Controller. Once again, this might come down to personal preference. It took me playing many hours of Mario Kart World to truly appreciate how nice these control sticks feel. Doing a whole bunch of drifts in Mario Kart World, it feels so nice using the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro Controller. Another really interesting addition to the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro Controller are the GL and GR buttons on the back of the controller. These are customizable buttons which you can map on a per game basis. So for example, if you want to map these controllers to, I don't know, the A button or the B button in Mario Kart World, you just hold down the home button and you can quickly and easily map it for that game in particular. Then if you switch to another game, I don't know, like Smash Brothers or something, and you want to map the GL and GR buttons to, say, the X and Y buttons, you can do that specifically for that game as well. So it's a really interesting addition. It's one of these features that we've seen in many third-party controllers or even on the Pro controllers from Xbox and PlayStation, and now it's just included with Nintendo's own Switch 2 Pro controller. You also get some additions that are useful for the social features of the Nintendo Switch 2, specifically the C button, which will open the game chat settings, and you also get a headphone jack at the bottom of the controller. This can be used for wired headphones if you want to quietly listen to your game, or you can apparently also plug in a full-on headset if you want to also use a mic for game chat. And besides those very obvious differences, Nintendo actually went in and built the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller controller from the ground up. So a lot of like the tiniest dimensions are slightly different than the original Nintendo Switch Pro controller in order to make it feel a bit more ergonomic and comfortable. Once again, I learned that from the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, only $9.99 on the Nintendo Switch eShop. And so I would consider the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller to be one of the necessary accessories for your Nintendo Switch, at least if you're able to afford it at its $84.99 US price tag. But hey, how about we take a look at some of the Nintendo Switch 2 accessories from Nintendo themselves and decide which ones you definitely need, maybe should get, or completely avoid. With Nintendo really pushing the new game chat feature, we saw the introduction of the Nintendo Switch 2 camera. Coming in at $54.99 US, I was immediately quite surprised actually using this for myself. The Nintendo Switch 2 camera is much smaller than I originally anticipated, and you basically just plug it into the USB-C port on your Nintendo Switch 2, and you're able to use a whole bunch of camera features found throughout the Nintendo Switch 2 and its games. Right off the bat, you can check out what your camera looks like when you set it up in your living room, or you can even use the camera in tabletop mode as well. When you're in a game chat party on the Nintendo Switch 2, you can show your camera feed with all of your friends, and you can even remove your background and have the game superimposed behind you. There are also a bunch of camera features found in the games themselves. You may have seen this viral clip from Valkyrae where your face will actually show up by your character in Mario Kart World, even spinning out whenever you get hit by an item. The upcoming Super Mario Party Jamboree Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Jamboree TV includes a bunch of camera mini games where you have to perform little actions in front of the camera, honestly kind of giving me PlayStation 2 iToy vibes. And there's even, I think, one mini game found in Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour that uses the Nintendo Switch 2 camera. Once again, $9.99 on the Nintendo eShop. I don't know why this video is turning into a Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour ad. But this camera is very interesting, if anything, just because of how it works. The Nintendo Switch 2 camera is a 1080p camera at, I believe, 30 frames per second. It features a privacy shutter where all you have to do is twist the dial on the camera and it'll cover up the lens. And it'll even show this image where, you know, you have the privacy shutter on and you can't see what the camera sees. But somewhat interesting is that this camera is basically just a webcam. I was able to test out plugging this camera into my Mac computer, and it just showed up as a regular webcam. It's not the greatest quality by any means, but I will say the most impressive thing about it is that it has a very, very wide angle. So if you're using the Nintendo Switch 2 in like a very tight space, I could honestly see using this camera as, you know, just a regular old webcam if you wanted to. And it's also really cool because if you use the privacy shutter once again, it even sends out the privacy shutter image to your computer as well. With all of that being said, you can actually use pretty much any old webcam that has USB-C with the Nintendo Switch 2. It's not only compatible with the Nintendo Switch 2 camera. So there have been many people online testing out the Nintendo Switch 2 with a Logitech webcam. Some people have been plugging in like their very expensive professional cameras, and some people even got it working with just an iPhone. I also honestly see a lot of the camera features for Nintendo Switch 2 to be quite niche. I personally don't know many people who would want to have their video feed on while they're playing games. A lot of the in-game camera features I don't feel like are really that necessary or something that I could see myself doing very often. So because of all of that, I think the Nintendo Switch 2 camera is an accessory that you definitely don't need. If you really want to use a camera with your Nintendo Switch 2, you might just have a webcam lying around that may work with the Nintendo Switch 2 instead. Next up, we have the Joy-Con 2 charging grip. As the name would imply, this is a grip to charge your Joy-Con 2 controllers. Although the Nintendo Switch 2 itself comes with a Joy-Con 2 grip so that you can use your Joy-Con 2 like a traditional controller, unfortunately, the included grip does not have a charging feature. With the Joy-Con 2 charging grip, you pop in your Joy-Con 2 controllers just like the regular grip, but this grip has a USB-C port on the top. So all you have to do is take a USB-C cable, plug it into the grip, and then you can plug the other end into your Nintendo Switch 2 dock, a USB wall charger, or even an external USB battery. And now you have a way to charge your Joy-Con 2 without having to connect it directly with the Switch 2 system. There are also some slight differences to differentiate the charging grip from the regular Joy-Con 2 grip. For one, the charging grip has a translucent design, whereas the regular grip is just solid black. I don't think it serves any purpose, but it does make it easier to see which one is the charging grip and which one is the regular grip. But also, just like the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller, the Joy-Con 2 charging grip include the GL and GR buttons. Once again, meaning that you can map these buttons to whatever button you would like for each individual game. So that's actually a pretty nice little bonus addition with the Joy-Con 2 charging grip. The unfortunate thing about the Joy-Con 2 charging grip though is that it does cost $39.99 US. I do wish that this was the grip that was included with every Nintendo Switch 2 system. You know, it just makes sense being able to charge your controllers while playing, you know, on your TV or whatever. So between the price tag and the convenience of being able to charge your Joy-Con in the grip, I would say that the Joy-Con 2 charging grip is something you can maybe consider if you're able to afford it. If you mainly play your Nintendo Switch with the Joy-Con on the TV, I do think it's nice to have the charging grip because there's nothing worse than, you know, going to play your Nintendo Switch 2 on the TV and then your Joy-Con are just dead. And the only way to charge them is by connecting it to the Switch 2 system. But what about Nintendo's big boy accessory for the Switch 2, the Nintendo Switch 2 dock set? This, I believe, is Nintendo's most expensive accessory that they sell, coming in at $119.99 US. Now you may be asking yourself, why the heck would you even want another Nintendo Switch 2 dock by itself? Well, if you're like me and you're switching between rooms with your Nintendo Switch 2, it is very nice and very convenient to have just a dock already set up and ready to go. So I can be playing my Nintendo Switch in the living room on the TV, but if somebody else wants to watch TV, I can very easily just pick up my Nintendo Switch 2, bring it into my bedroom, and play on my monitor. Now, especially considering the price, I will say this is 100% just a convenience thing. You could very well just, you know, unplug your dock and bring it to whatever other TV or monitor you want to play your Switch 2 on. Heck, if you want to save some money, you can just get the Nintendo Switch 2 AC adapter, have one plugged into your second TV or monitor, unplug the dock, and then just bring the dock to whatever other TV or monitor you want to use. It's just that I'm lazy. And as for this accessory itself, it literally just comes with what's included with your Nintendo Switch 2 system. So you have the separate dock, the HDMI cable, and the USB-C cable and power brick. So I would say that the Nintendo Switch 2 dock set is an accessory that you don't need for your Nintendo Switch 2. If you play your Nintendo Switch 2 in multiple rooms, this is just a luxury accessory to have, and you know, it just makes it a little bit more convenient. Now here's a little bonus accessory, the Nintendo GameCube controller for Nintendo Switch 2. In order to purchase this from Nintendo's website, you do have to be a Nintendo Switch Online member. And this is pretty much exactly as you would expect. It's a wireless GameCube controller for Nintendo Switch 2. And it's perfect to use with your Nintendo Switch for the new Nintendo GameCube Nintendo Classics app, which currently has a few Nintendo GameCube games on there, and of course they will continue to add more in the future. However, you do have to be subscribed to the Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack. The really cool thing though is that you can use this controller with other games besides just the GameCube games. Whether it's Super Mario Sunshine and Super Mario 3D All-Stars, Mario Kart World, and even Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, which will even recognize this controller as a regular GameCube controller so that you can customize and map all the buttons. And for the most part, this does pretty much feel like a GameCube controller. It's really cool to have a brand new GameCube controller where all of the sticks and buttons are still intact. If you grew up with the GameCube, I'm sure a lot of your old GameCube controllers, the sticks are probably super duper loose and everything might be falling apart. And if anything, I just love being able to have a wireless GameCube controller. While you can use the Super Smash Bros. GameCube adapter and then plug in a Wavebird, it's pretty neat to be able to just, connect a GameCube controller directly to the Switch 2 itself. And speaking of which, a really important disclaimer here, the Nintendo GameCube Nintendo Switch Online controller by itself only works with the Nintendo Switch 2, not even the original Nintendo Switch. I have heard some people mention that if you buy an 8-bit do USB wireless adapter, it does connect to the original Nintendo Switch. I haven't tried that myself, so I can't confirm, but I've just heard people say that. But if you just want to use the controller by itself, it only works with the Switch 2, which is also why we have an included C button on the GameCube controller itself, along with all of your necessary buttons like the home button, capture button, and even a ZL button. Now, this all does come at a cost of $64.99 US, and that price tag is on top of having to pay for the Nintendo Switch Online membership. So I would say that you should maybe get the Nintendo GameCube Nintendo Switch Online controller. Once again, it's super cool to have a brand new GameCube controller and for it to be wireless with the Switch 2. It works perfectly for the GameCube Nintendo Classics games, but it is a bit of a hefty price. If you have the GameCube USB adapter, you could still just use your GameCube controllers like that, and all of the GameCube games work with regular Switch 2 controllers like the Joy-Con 2 or even the Pro controller. Plus, the GameCube Nintendo Classics app even has a feature where you can remap the buttons if you want. But I saved for last what I consider to be the absolute mandatory Nintendo Switch 2 accessory: the Joy-Con 2 wheels. At $24.99 for a set of 2, these things are the greatest invention since sliced bread. I love them with all of my heart. In case it's not obvious, I'm joking. Listen, I think we're all aware of Nintendo's shtick now, where every time we get a new Mario Kart game, they also release a new piece of plastic, starting with Mario Kart Wii, then Mario Kart 8 and 8 Deluxe. Heck, even the handheld game Mario Kart 7 got its own wheel, where you just put the entire 3DS system in it. So it only makes sense that with Mario Kart World, we get new Joy-Con 2 wheels. And I mean, for the most part, they are competent steering wheels. Compared to Nintendo's previous steering wheel accessories, I would honestly say this is the best one they've made so far. I like that there's this rough texture around the edges, like an actual steering wheel. Considering the size, there is actually a nice kind of heft to it, and it even makes use of the Joy-Con 2's magnet system, so your controllers just easily slide right into place, and they stay in place even if you're shaking the wheel and everything. When it comes time to take it out, all you have to do is just pull it out. Like, this feels like a generally nice product. And no joke, I learned quite a bit about, what they went through to make this wheel from the Nintendo Switch 2 welcome tour, $9.99 US on the eShop. I feel like the main target demographic for this accessory is probably kids. And now, being an uncle to a 3-year-old, I can totally understand how this steering wheel makes Mario Kart more fun and easier to pick up and play for younger children. But for $25, it's kinda crazy to pay that much for just plastic steering wheel controller shells. There's nothing stopping you from just holding the Joy-Con 2 horizontally and playing with motion controls on. That still kind of gives you the feeling of turning a steering wheel. I guess if you really need the immersion of holding a tiny little steering wheel, here you go. So although these are surprisingly pretty well built and it's been constructed very well, I definitely don't think you need this accessory for your Nintendo Switch 2. If you want to see my crazy journey of picking up my Nintendo Switch 2 and all of these accessories, check out my video below. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of all of these accessories. For now, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to all of our members. My name is Chase, and I will see you guys again soon. Bye.